Here's 6 budget-friendly EDC utility knives under $30. One of the nice things about these EDC utility knives is that there's a large selection of affordable knives on the market. Now, carrying a utility knife, there's a lot of pros and cons compared to a traditional pocket knife. One of the major pros that comes to mind when it comes to these utility knives, you have the ability to change the blade whenever you want. And I'm also thinking of one of the cons that I always come back to. A razor blade is not as durable as a traditional pocket knife blade, so that's one thing to keep in mind when you're selecting one of these. Most of your everyday carry utility knives, they're either going to have a sliding blade or a folding blade. And some of them even have extra features like pry bars and screwdrivers. So all these knives I'm going to show you today, they all have replaceable blades, so I just want to show you how each one differs from one to another. The Gerber prybrid is probably the most expensive knife I have in the lineup today. It comes in just around $30. Its key feature is the heavy-duty frame and the pry bar built into it. Prybrid is on the larger side of the category. It has a thicker and longer frame than any of the other knives that I'm looking at. When you're holding onto this knife, you can definitely feel there's more weight and it's a larger size than all the others. The only thing I would change on this Gerber is adding a pocket clip. Because of its larger size, you can get down in your pocket and get sideways, and it can get very uncomfortable. This prybrid is more than just a knife with a pry bar. It has a nice little cord cutter built right into the handle. It also has a nice little nail puller slot, so this Olight O-Tackle has actually been getting a little bit of criticism online because it requires specialty blades from Olight. I can completely understand people's frustrations that they can't just go down to the nearest store or get just a universal blade that works with their other knives. That's a pretty understandable complaint. But I did do some checking on the Olight store. They do have the blades available, and they don't mark them up. They are specialty blades just for the Olights, but they're really not marked up more than any other blade that you're going to be buying. I've actually been really enjoying this little knife. It's really slender and small, it doesn't take up much room, and it works really well. The sliding mechanism is easy. The blade changing process is actually a little more difficult than the others, but it is a great little knife, and it has a little bottle opener and a little screwdriver. It does have some extra features that are nice. The only really negative aspect on this knife is changing the blade. It's kind of a complicated process. It's not hard, but there's just some little tiny parts that are kind of hard to deal with. You have to remove this little screw that threads into the thumb slider on this side. And both of those pieces are going to come apart, and that's when you can slide your blade out. These parts are really small and they could easily be lost, so you want to do this on a bench or table when you change your blade. I know that's kind of frustrating if you're working on a job site or you're doing something where you don't have time to sit down and do something like this. That's kind of maintenance that should be quick. Changing a blade shouldn't require you to worry about tiny screws or anything like that. So I would keep that in mind on this knife. Other than that, if you just sit down at a table, it's actually really easy. All in all, changing the blade on this little knife is not that hard, but compared to the other knives I have, it's actually probably the most difficult knife I have in this lineup to change the blade. So I kind of have to knock it for that. Other than that, it's actually a great little knife. This little slidewinder by Outdoor Edge probably makes the top 3 out of the 6 that I have here today. It even has little extra features like a pocket clip, a bottle opener, and a little screwdriver. I have to say this knife is probably the best bargain out of the group. It has one of the lowest prices and has all the features that you want. It's only about $10 and it's available in 3 different colors: black, blue, and orange. To exchange the blade, all you have to do is extend the blade all the way, then press the button and hold it and slide the blade out. The blade will release when you pull it, and all you have to do is flip it around or exchange it. This Itoki K1 is probably the most visually appealing knife that I have here. I think this is a very nice looking knife, but it's not the smoothest operating knife. If you're looking for a one-handed operated knife where you can just slide the blade out with your thumb or something like that, this is probably not the knife for you. From my experience, it really takes 2 hands to get the blade out. I see some other videos where people kind of looked like they could slide it out. To me, it'd be kind of challenging. You'd almost have to push the button with one finger and then slide the blade out with your thumb. Well, to me, it's not easy for me to do, so I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a quick thumb slider. But what I can really appreciate is a company that just tries to keep things mechanical and simplistic. There's not very many moving parts, so it's just less parts that's going to fail on you. In my opinion, this is actually a really great knife. It just takes a little bit more effort to slide the blade out. One of the nice things this company did with this knife kit, they included the knife, and they actually included 10 extra blades in this little hex bit. This knife also has a lot of little extra features included. It has a ruler on both sides of each edge. It also has a little slot here for this little hex tool. There's also a little pry bar on this end and then a little screwdriver on this end. I think having a little pry bar on these tools is kind of essential because a razor blade has no strength to it. You can't bend it, it'll snap and break on you. So I think it's nice that these companies included these little extra bits of metal built into the frames. That way, if you do need a pry bar or for any situation, you don't have to break your blade. You can also use this little hole right here for a keychain or lanyard. If you don't really need that little tool for anything, you can also just find other creative uses for it. So the one thing that really stands out to me about this tool is how thin and small it is. Being that it really doesn't have a thumb sliding mechanism, this company was able to make this thing extremely thin. It's very strong, it doesn't feel cheaply made at all. So if you're looking for a knife that takes up very little room, that can actually fit into the smallest of places, this may be a good knife for you. You really can't go wrong with this little Gerber pocket knife. This is really a great pocket carry knife because of its thin design. It has a really nice pocket clip included. Overall, it's a very nice knife to handle because of its very smooth finish. The only really negative thing I could think of on this knife, it requires a screwdriver to remove the blade. For me, it's not really a big deal to have to use a screwdriver, but compared to some of the other knives, it does take tools, so that's kind of a negative thing. This knife really has a unique design to it. It's kind of a personal taste thing if you like this style of knife. I kind of think of it as an executive style, just because it doesn't look like a knife you would use on a job site or take camping. It's just got a really smooth design. I really can't find anything negative to say about this little knife, so it ranks really well with the rest of these knives I have here today. This little Coast knife is probably one of my favorites out of the group. It does everything it's supposed to do really well. It operates like a traditional folding pocket knife, and the blade is very easy to exchange. The styling is also top notch. The black knife with the gold hardware I think looks really nice. It has a traditional liner lock to keep the blade locked when it's open. It also has an additional locking feature on the back to keep the blade locked in place. This little Coast is a great little pocket knife because of its small size and its convenient pocket clip. It's also really affordable. This one here is less than $12. This little knife doesn't have all the little features like the other knives have. It doesn't have a pry bar, any of that kind of stuff. But what it does do is it functions very well. It's a pocket knife. It folds and closes and locks. Everything works as it should, and it's actually a very impressive little knife. Hey, if you guys want to add a utility knife to your collection, I'm going to leave a link in the description of my video for all the knives seen in this video today. So if I had to rank these knives, I would probably want to separate them into two categories. Because over here I got folding knives, and over here I have the sliding knives. So I want to keep those kind of separate because they're really quite a bit different. Out of the two folding knives, I'd probably have to say the Coast is my favorite. There's not much, it doesn't do much better than the Gerber. The only difference is that the blade change is a lot easier. That's the only big difference between those two, is the blade change on this one is just easier. Other than that, these two knives are very comparable. Now, surprisingly enough, my favorite sliding knife would probably be this little Outdoor Edge. It has a lot of little features. It has a great little sliding mechanism. Everything works like it should. The blade is very easy to exchange. This one only requires you to push this little button and then pop the blade out and just snap a new one back in. It has a little pocket clip. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. It has a little bit of everything, and it's also very inexpensive. This is probably one of the cheaper knives here, so it's really hard to beat. So that's why I picked this one as the #1 slider, because it has all the features and it's one of the most affordable ones. Hey guys, leave me a comment. I'd like to know what you guys carry when it comes to utility knives. I just like to know what features you prefer the best. Do you prefer a slider or folder? Just stuff like that's interesting to me.